Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Hey, Daf 105 of Masechta Pesachim. Another great Daf over here in Arvei Pesachim. We will discuss eating on Motzei Shabbos and how that relates to havdala. Very interesting. If you have shalashudas and you want to go for a long time and go until after Shabbos, when you make havdala, what if you didn't say kiddush on Friday night? Can you say it the next day? What if you didn't make havdala on Motzei Shabbos? Can you make havdala the next day? What about the day after that? And then at the end of the daf, we get to a list of 8 things that apply to kos shel bracha. One of them is what's called pagum. If anybody's ever heard of the halacha of pagum, so that comes up also at the end of today's daf. So a lot of very interesting inyanim over here. Let us begin on Daf Kufei Amud Aleph. 3 lines into the page of Chananya bar Shlamya v'Tamidei de Rav Haviyasve b'Sudasa. So Rav Chananya bar Shlamya and students of Rav, were sitting in a Suda, and it was Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon. V'koya lai Rav Amnuna Sava, and Rav Amnuna Sava was I guess waiting on them. Now, interestingly, we learned to Masechta Eruvin on Daf Samach Gimel that there were Tosfos says therein that there were 2 Rav Amnunas. One Rav Amnuna was a student of Rav, and another Rav Amnuna was a student of Rav Huna. Which Rav Amnuna do you think this is? Maybe it's the student of Rav. I mean, he's with other students of Rav. Maybe that's who it is. Or maybe it's somebody else altogether. Who's Rav Amnuna Sava? But maybe that's what it means. The older Rav Amnuna. Rav Amnuna, the student of Rav. Anyways. Amrule zilchazi yimakdish yoma nafsik v'nikboe l'shabata. So Amrule, so they said to Rav Amnuna Sava. So again, you have Rav Chananya bar Shlamya and other students of Rav. They were having a Suda on Friday afternoon before Shabbos. And then Rav Amnuna Sava was, serving them. And they asked Rav Amnuna Sava, he says, hey man, can you go outside and see if it's getting dark? Because if it's getting dark, right, Yimakdish Yoma, if it's becoming Shabbos, Nafsik will stop eating, V'nikboy l'Shabbata, and like Rabbi Yehuda, we'll stop eating, we'll bench, we'll wrap it up, and then we'll start over, and we'll make it a Suda Shabbos. Amlu lo tzrichisu, to which Rav Amnuna said, to which Rav Amnuna says, there's really no point. There's no need to go and look and see if it got dark, because Shabbat kova nafsha. Shabbos is just going to be koveh on its own. You don't need to stop this meal and then start another meal with the intention of Shabbos. No, memele, you can just keep going weiter, keep on hanging out at your meal. And memele, on its own, it'll become a Shabbos meal. Kind of like Rabbi Yossi and Shmuel, that Poris Mapo Mekadesh. You don't have to stop eating your meal, continue eating your meal, and what you'll do is you'll just make kiddush right now. You make kiddush for Shabbos, but the meal itself is just going to automatically become a Shabbos meal. Because just like Shabbos is koveh l'maiser, what does that mean? It means that if you have produce that you haven't completely, finished off all the processes that you have to do in order for it to be considered tevel and chayv and meiser, right? There's you have to collect the grain and put it in a pile, and even off the top of the pile, there's a whole process, and at the end of that process, then it's tevel and it's chayv and meiser. However, if you didn't complete that process, or if you do use loopholes, well then you can eat the produce in an arai way, in a temporary way. However, when it's Shabbos, it's automatically considered a kavua way. So produce that you would be allowed to eat in a temporary way without having to separate Trumas and Meisers, on Shabbos you would be unable to eat it even in a temporary way, because Shabbos automatically makes it considered a Sudas Keva, and therefore a fixed way of eating, an official way of eating, and therefore you'd be unable to eat this produce on Shabbos. The same thing applies to Kiddush as well. When Shabbos comes, so then it automatically, the Suda automatically becomes a Suda Shabbos, and you don't have to wrap up the initial Suda and start a brand new one for Shabbos. It automatically becomes a Shabbos Suda. Just make Kiddush now in the middle. Wow, that was like a loud car. So just be poris mapu mekadesh pashit. Just make kiddush now for Shabbos and continue your suda. Savramina. So now they figured, so they figured, well, if this is the case for kiddush, that when I'm eating a Shabbos suda, when I'm eating a suda on Erev Shabbos, so then when Shabbos comes, it automatically becomes a Shabbos suda and I make kiddush now. So they thought that the same thing would apply to havdala. That if they're eating shal shudas on Motzoi Shakil at the end of Shabbos, they're eating shal shudas, and it's going long, and Shabbos is already over. So Memele, their meal becomes like a Motzoi Shabbos meal, and they should make havdala immediately. So Amr Rav Amram says Rav Amram to them, Hachi Amar Rav. This is what Rav said: the kiddush kovas v'lo havdala kovas. That Shabbos is for koveh for kiddush, but not for havdala. Meaning, on a Friday afternoon, when it becomes Shabbos, so immediately when it becomes Shabbos, you make kiddush and it becomes a Shabbos suda. That's not the case when it comes to havdala. That if you're going late with shal shudas, you don't have to immediately make havdala when Shabbos ends. Rather, you can keep on, you can extend your shal shudas. And what does Rashi say? Rashi says, Zeu kvod Shabbos shehigomer sudaso af la'achar she'echshich. That this is considered the honor of Shabbos, that you want to extend shal shudas and extend Shabbos into the week and into Motzoi Shabbos. So therefore you don't have to stop shal shudas immediately when Shabbos ends in order to make havdala. And we're going to see that there's a question about if you eat on Motzoi Shabbos, can you make havdala anymore? We're going to get there, right? So there's a concern that when Shabbos ends, I should have to stop eating immediately. And we're going to see right now as well about what you can eat and what you can't eat before havdala. So therefore, there's a thought to say, look, when it comes to shal shudas, immediately when Shabbos ends, you're no longer allowed to eat. You have to stop. You have to make havdala immediately. To which we say, no, it's different. When Shabbos comes in, so then, Memele automatically becomes a Shabbos suda. You make kiddush immediately. When Shabbos ends, however, you could extend shal shudas into Motzoi Shabbos, and it's very mechubad and honorable for Shabbos that you extend your Shabbos suda and you'll make havdala afterwards. To which the Gemara says, but to clarify, that means that if you had already started a suda on Shabbos, shal shudas, so you don't have to stop your suda when Shabbos ends. You can go weiter. However, we would not start a new meal after Shabbos ends before making havdala. Now, when we say that you don't have to stop, so that's if you're like eating a meal. I think that halacha we say that you have to wash, you have to have bread. So if you wash and you have bread, so then you don't stop the meal when Motzoi Shabbos comes. But if you're just drinking things, well then you would stop. So if, I don't know, you're drinking a glass of wine or something with your friends, and it's Motzoi Shabbos, and you didn't wash necessarily, so then, meaning even though you started drinking on Shabbos, when Motzoi Shabbos comes, you would stop because you didn't wash. It's just drinking. And now we're saying, so it kind of switches a little bit the context, but now we're saying, and when we say that on Motzoi Shabbos you should not drink anything until you make havdala, that's talking about things like wine and beer. But you could drink water. You could drink water. So when we say that on Motzoi Shabbos, you can drink, that we don't drink or eat anything on Motzoi Shabbos until we make havdala. So that's davka. You're allowed to drink water, though. You're allowed to drink water, and the Rashbam points out that this is actually a difference between havdala and kiddush. That when it comes to havdala, we don't. You're allowed to drink water before havdala. But when it comes to kiddush, though, you wouldn't drink even water before kiddush. As he says, out of the honor of Shabbos, we don't want you to even drink water before kiddush. first make kiddush as soon as you can. Ufliga de Rav Huna, and this argues on Rav Huna, the Rav Huna Chazi la'u gaver the shasa maya kodem havdala, because Rav Huna saw a certain fellow who was drinking water before havdala. Amrle, and he said to this fellow, "No mustafi ma'me askara, oy vavoy. Aren't you concerned about askara? Do you remember askara? I believe the Gemara in bracha says that there are 903 ways to die, and askara is the worst one. So Rav Huna says, fellow, aren't you scared that if you drink water before havdala, you'll get askara?" The Tana Mishmei, Rav Akiva, because it was taught in the name of Rav Akiva, Kolatoim klum kodem sheyavdil misaso ba'askara, oy vavoy. If a person tastes anything before havdala, he's going to die this terrible askara death. Rabbanan devei Rav Ashi lokab de'amaya. Look, the rabbis by the Besmedrash of Rav Ashi were not so makbid to stay away from water before havdala. Okay, very interesting. So Lamaisa, it sounds like before havdala you could drink water, but don't drink anything else. Ba'amine Ravina me Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So now Ravina asks Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Mishlo kiddush be'erev Shabbos ma'u she'ikadosh v'olech kol hayom kulo. If you didn't make kiddush on erev Shabbos, on Friday night, so can you make kiddush the next day? Now, when we say kiddush here, we mean like the bracha. Right, kiddush on Friday night is basically two brachas. There's boi pri agafen, and there's asher kiddushanim mitzvosim v'atzavanim v'shabbos kosher v'avosim v'chilanu, that whole thing. So that's kiddush. So if you didn't, now kiddush during the day, of course, really, make it a din, kiddush during the day, all you have to say is boi pri agafen. On Shabbos day, you just say there's nothing more than that. Zachor and Shomer, that's just psukim in the Torah. You know, some people just say al kain. Whatever, so if you really, all you need to say is the bracha of boi pri agafen l'maisa. But at night, on Friday night, we say the whole kiddush, right? Asher kiddushanim b'mitzvosav v'asavanu v'shabbos kosher, right? That whole thing. So now, if you didn't say kiddush, this extra bracha on Friday night, can you say it on Shabbos day? So Omerle, so Nachman bar Yitzchak says to Ravina, Mid'amir b'nei Reb Chia. Or from the fact that the sons of Reb Chia say that if somebody didn't make havdala on Motzoi Shabbos, so you can make havdala the whole week. And Rashbam points out over here also, but we're going to get to it a little bit later as well, that it means until Wednesday. You can make havdala until Wednesday. So Chanami, Yishlo Kiddush Be'erev Shabbos, Mekadosh V'olech Kol Yom Kulo. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak wanted to assume that just like you can make havdala until Wednesday, so you can make kiddush until the end of Shabbos. So you would be able to make kiddush the next day. Eisvei. Ravina asks a kasha to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Leile Shabbos v'leile Yom Tov yesh boin kedusha alakos. So when it comes to Friday night and Yom Tov night, so you make kiddush. V'yesh boin azkar b'vekas hamazon, and there's also a special insert in benching. Shabbos, of course, it's Utzei, and on Yom Tov it's Yala v'Yovo. Shabbos v'Yom Tov ein boen kiddush alakos v'yesh boen azkar b'vekas hamazon. Now, when it comes to Shabbos day and Yom Tov day, so then there's no special kiddush. It's boi pri agafen, but there's no bracha of kiddush. And they still do have an insert in benching, right? Utzei and Yala v'Yovo respectively. And here's the shaila. Here's the question that Ravina is asking of Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, if what you're saying is correct, that if you didn't say kiddush on Friday night, you could say it the next day, well then how come this brisa says that there's no kiddush on Shabbos day and on Yom Tov day? Shabbos v'Yom Tov nami mishkach aslu tiesh ben kiddush alakos tilo kiddush me'orta mekadosh l'machor. You hear the kasha? The kasha is that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, we have a brisa that says that you don't make kiddush on Shabbos day or on Yom Tov day. What do you mean? If you didn't make kiddush Friday night, you're going to make kiddush on Shabbos day or on Yom Tov day. Or if you didn't make kiddush on Friday night or Yom Tov night, you're going to make it on Shabbos day or Yom Tov day, respectively. So how come the brisa is saying that there's, never any kiddush on Shabbos or Yom Tov day? According to you, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, there is kiddush on Shabbos or Yom Tov day. If you missed it at night. So Amalei de'i lo katoni. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, the Braisa is not talking about nudniks. It's not talking about people who didn't make kiddush on Friday night. It's talking about kilu in general. The mahalach is Friday night and Yom Tov night. There is kiddush. Shabbos day and Yom Tov day. There's no kiddush. Okay, if a guy forgot, okay, better if he forgets, so then you'll do it later. But the Braisa is not talking about that. Eisvei, Ravina asks another kasha. Kvod Yom Tov v'chvod Laila. No, Kvod Yom v'chvod Laila. Kvod Yom Kodem. V'im ein lo ele kos echad omer olav kiddush hayom mipnei shekiddush hayom kodem l'chvod yom. This is really interesting. Let's read it again. Kvod Yom v'chvod Laila Kvod Yom Oder Kodem. So the honor of the day and the honor of the night, the winner is the honor of the day. Meaning, so we have two things that we're talking about over here. We're talking about kiddush at night and kiddush during the day, but then there's the kavod, which is to drink nice wine, to buy nice foods, to have a nice suda. So in terms of if, let's say you only have really good food and you have to choose either the nighttime suda or the daytime suda to serve it at the daytime suda. The kvod yom is kodem. Now, in terms of kiddush, though, right, what do we say? Now, if all you have is only one glass of wine, and therefore you have to choose, either I can make kiddush on it on Friday night, or I could save it till Shabbos day, or Yom Tov day, and then I can eat it in my suda, and it'll be geshmak. I'll have delicious food, delicious wine, but I only have one glass of wine. So we say, Omer Olav, Kiddush Hayom. So better to drink that glass of wine in the context of kiddush at night, Kiddush Hayom, meaning kiddush at night, when we're mekadosh the Yom. Because kiddush takes precedence over having a geshmak suda. So the geshmak suda is during the day, kiddush is at night, and if you only have one glass of wine, better to use it for kiddush at night rather than to save it for the suda during the day. Navi Misa, fact Ravina. So he says, Nu Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, if what you're saying is correct, that if you didn't make kiddush at night, you can make it during the day. Well then, Lishavka ad l'mocher v'lavid beitarti. So then, why isn't the solution the following? If you only have one glass of wine, rather than using it for kiddush on Friday night, how about this? Save it till the next day. And since if you didn't make kiddush on Friday night, you can make kiddush on Shabbos day. So just save the glass of wine till Shabbos day, and then, like this, you could feed two birds with one seed. You have one glass of wine, you'll use it for kiddush. You didn't make it the night before, so you'll make it now, kiddush on the suda, and you'll also have it for the, it'll be in the context of the suda, as the Shram points out, it's not exactly in the context of the suda, because you're drinking it before the suda, and really, kvod yom, it would be like during the meal. But he says it's at least, it's in the context of the meal. So, Nu Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, if you could make kiddush during the day, if you missed it at night, so then when you only have one glass of wine, shouldn't you save it for the day? So, Amar lechaviva mitzvah b'shaita. So, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak answers, he says, yes, but there's a concept that we've seen before, which is chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. It's more beloved. We prefer to do a mitzvah at its proper time. And therefore, yes, technically if you miss kiddush on Friday night, you could do it during the day. That's true. But it's not ideal. Preferably, we want to make kiddush immediately when Shabbos starts. Bring it in with a glass of wine, kiddush. So therefore, we would prefer to say if you only have one glass of wine, just make kiddush on it on Friday night, rather than to push it off and do it the next day in the context of the meal and try to feed two birds with one seed. No. Better to just do the mitzvah properly at its preferred time. But do we really say this? Do we really say that when it comes to brachas, we prefer to have the immediate mitzvah now? That doesn't really make sense. But chaviva mitzvah b'shaita that keilu, I guess we'll see in the context of the Gemara what that means. But that we prefer the current mitzvah. Let's see. We learn in a braisa. Okay, somebody comes home from shul on Motzoi Shabbos. So first he makes the bracha by Piragafen, Valamar, Valabasamim, and on the candle and on the Basamim. Havdala, and then afterwards he says Havdala. You can skip the next two words. So now, of course, this is Beis Shammai's opinion. we make the bracha on the besamim first and then the light. This is Taka Beis Shammai's opinion, according to Yehuda, right? Now, here we go. If he only has one glass of wine, and he's currently in his shal shudis, right? So it sounds like the Reish is talking about where he comes from shul, as we're going to see in just a few minutes. And now the Seifa sounds like it's talking about where he's eating shal shudis, and now he finishes, but he only has one glass of wine left. And he needs, with that one glass of wine, to bench, and he also needs to make havdala. So then, so hold the glass of wine, don't drink it now, wait until after you're done eating. And then you'll use that one glass of wine for birkas hamazon, for benching, and then afterwards use it for havdala. Now, and we don't say that you first make havdala and then bench afterwards. Meaning, if we say chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, that we prefer to do a mitzvah, at its proper time, as soon as we can, well then havdala we should do first. Okay, it's right now time for havdala. Shabbos ended, time to make havdala. If we say chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, you should do havdala first and then bench. But this Bryce is saying first bench and then do havdala. No. So Amalei. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak answers Ravina, Anu lo chakima anu. I'm not some kind of a wise fellow who's just, saying on my own that chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, that we prefer doing mitzvahs on time. V'lo choza anu. I don't know, I'm not some kind of visionary. I don't have any kinds of special visions. V'lo yichida anu. Nor am I only just quoting a das yachid over here. Ela gamarna v'sadarna anu. Says, look, I learned this in the yeshiva, and I organized my learning in front of other Rebbeim. Ki'ilu, when I'm saying over here that you make the bracha on the kiddush at night rather than saving it till the next day, and I said chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, and we prefer to do kiddush at night, I'm not making this up. What I'm saying is the same way that they paskin in the Beis HaMedrash, and rather shaynilon ben ayula yoma lafuke yoma. That there's a difference between kiddush and havdala. What's the difference? Ayula yoma kol kamad makdeminon le odif u'mechabevinon le. When it comes to when Shabbos begins, well then kol kamad makdeminon le odif, we want to bring it in as soon as possible. Therefore, if we only have one glass of wine, we don't want to say save that glass of wine till tomorrow. No, u'mechabevinon le. We make it beloved. We say, wow, okay, let's just use this glass of wine as soon as we can to bring in Shabbos and make kiddush. However, afuke yoma, when it comes to the end of Shabbos, bringing out the day, so then, at the end of Shabbos, we prefer to push it off. We'd say, you know what, if you have one glass of wine, first make the benching and then the havdala. We don't want to make it seem like a burden that we want to finish Shabbos as soon as we can. So therefore, that's the difference. When Shabbos is starting, so yeah, we're going to say, make kiddush on, you only have one glass of wine, use it for kiddush Friday night. Don't wait till the next day so that you can also use it in the context of your, owning Shabbos. And at your kvod Shabbos, at your meal. No, rather, when Shabbos starts, make that bracha as soon as you can, the kiddush. However, at the end of Shabbos, we don't want you to immediately make havdala. If you could push it off by first benching, do that, because we don't want it to seem like Shabbos is a burden that we just want to get rid of as soon as we can. Now says the Gemara, Shmamina Mia Masnisa Tamne, that this brisa, right, this brisa about Hanichnos, the vase of Motzoi Shabbos, Mevarch Alayayin, Valamor, Valabsam, this whole thing, and then if he only has one glass of wine, so he benches and then he does havdala, we can learn out 8 things from this brisa. Shmamina Amavdo B'Tfilah Tzorich Shavdal Alakos. We learned that somebody who makes havdala in his Shmona Esrei, in Ma'ariv, he still needs to make havdala on a glass of wine when he gets home. Now, as the Rashbam points out, because the assumption is when he says Anichnos leveis of Motzoi Shabbos, somebody who comes home on Motzoi Shabbos, where's he coming from? He's coming from shul. And Mistama, he already said havdala in the davening, because that's what you do on Motzoi Shabbos, and nonetheless, we're saying that he needs to make havdala on a glass of wine when he gets home. Vishmamina bracha tuna kos. We also learn that that benching requires a kosher bracha. As we're saying in the Seifa, that if he only has one glass of wine, then he should use it for both the kosher bracha for benching as well as for havdala. We also learn that a kos shel bracha, a kos that you're using, for havdala, for benching, for kiddush, kos shel bracha, it needs a certain minimum amount. Because if it didn't have a certain minimum amount, so what does it mean that he only has one glass of wine? Just split it into two. No, the point is that there's a certain minimum that you need to be considered a glass of wine, and he only has, which is generally a revius. So he only has one revius, and that's why he can only use it in one shot, because if he drinks part of it, he won't have a revius anymore. We also learn that somebody who makes a bracha, dafka needs to taste it, because if you don't need to actually taste it, well then you can use the same glass of wine multiple times, right? The whole point is that you have one glass of wine, it needs a certain amount, you're going to have to drink some of it, and now after you drink it, you're not going to have that amount anymore, so therefore you have to choose how are you going to get the most bang for your buck. We also learn that if you taste it, so then it's what's called pagum. Pagum means that you can no longer use it for kosher bracha anymore. So kilu, if you have, which is also interesting, kilu, if you have some wine and you use it for you make kiddush on it and you drink a little bit, you can nobody else can make kiddush on that same wine, or let's say somebody else needs to hear kiddush, so you want to make it again. You can't use that same wine. What you could do is there are things you could do. I think we learned about it in Masechet Brachos. You can add wine onto it, and that'll basically fix it by just adding more wine. But by tasting that wine, you can no longer make a bracha on that wine anymore. And therefore, kilu, if all you have is one glass of wine, okay, so even if it's a little bit more than a revius, once you drink it, it's now going to be pagum, and you can no longer use it for a second kosher bracha. So if you wanted to, let's say, use that same glass for benching and for havdala, and you say, well, there's a little bit more than a revius, why don't I just use one? Why don't I just use it for benching? I'll drink a little bit, and then the rest of it I'll use for havdala. You can't do that, because once you drink from it, it's pagum. We also learn that even if you eat something, you could still make havdala. We're going to get to this machlokas, I think, tomorrow, that there's a question of, let's say on Motzei Shabbos you eat something. You're not supposed to eat before havdala, as we learned earlier. What if you do eat? Can you still make havdala? It's taka shaila. So we want to say from here that, I guess the assumption is that, well, since he's at his meal and he's eating, so even though he's eating, he could still make havdala after that. We see that when you only have one glass of wine, you can make two kedushas on one glass, i.e. you're benching on it and also using it for havdala. And we also see that this braisa davka is, right, when it says that first you make a bracha on the wine, and then on the candles, and then on the besamim, and then on the havdala, so that's like Beis Shammai, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Fine. Rav Ashi Amar, Taimu Pagma v'kosher bracha tzarich shir chad milsahi. Rav Ashi says that actually this concept of tasting it makes it pagum and therefore unusable, that is the same thing as the fact that a kosher bracha requires a certain minimum amount. Meaning, as he says, but this is what it means. My taimu pagmo mishum de kosher bracha tzarich shir. How come if you taste it, you make it pagum? Well, because you need a certain minimum amount for a kosher bracha. And the assumption is that if you have exactly a revius, well then by tasting it, you're no longer going to have a revius. And that's why you cannot use it anymore. However, Rav Ashi would say that if you add, a revius and a half, and you drink a little bit and you still have a revius left, well then that would be okay. You can continue to use it. You can use it again. Right? There's nothing inherently wrong with drinking a shtickle. Whereas according to Tanakama, Rav Ashi isn't exactly a Tana, but according to the initial way of understanding the Brisa, Davka, according to the initial thing that we wanted to say from the Brisa, the idea is even just by simply drinking from the wine, it makes it unusable anymore for kosher bracha, unless you fix it by adding more, whatever it is. And that's even if there's still more wine left, at least a revius. Rav Ashi says no, as long as there's a revius, you could still use it for kosher bracha. It's only considered pagum if by drinking it now there's less than a revius. Okay. Now, that was Daf Kufay of Masechta Pesachim. Let us do a shtickle review. Eating on Motzoi Shabbos. So, it sounds like based on the Gemara, if you had already started your shal shudas before Shabbos ended, on Shabbos afternoon, so then you can continue after Shabbos as long as you want, and you'll make havdala later. We said, however, that if you did not start to eat shal shudas before Shabbos ends, then you shouldn't start after Shabbos ends. And when we say that you shouldn't eat anything, that means that it doesn't apply to water. You'd be allowed to drink water before havdala, but as Rashbam points out, that's not necessarily the case by kiddush. You shouldn't drink anything before kiddush. Make kiddush first. We discussed what happens if you miss kiddush at night. So if you miss kiddush at night, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says that you'd be allowed to make kiddush the next day. You'd be able to make kiddush the next day. We talked about the concept of chaviva mitzvah b'shaita came up, right? Because we had suggested that maybe if you missed kiddush at night, well, maybe if you only have one glass of wine, maybe you should save it for the next day, because we said also that kavod yom comes before kavod laila. We'd prefer that you have a good geshmaka meal during the day rather than night if you only have a choice for one or the other. So we suggested, well, if you only also have one glass of wine, maybe save that till the next day and have it with your kavod yom, and you can have wine with your suda. So we say no, chaviva mitzvah b'shaita, that we'd prefer to have the mitzvah at its proper time, i.e. to make kiddush immediately when Shabbos comes in. And at the end of the daf, we discussed different halachos that apply to kol shel bracha, such as that it needs a shear of a revius, and that you have to taste it. You can't just make a bracha and nobody drinks it. Somebody has to drink it. The Rashbam actually points out that it can even be a child could drink it. And we got into the concept of pagum, which generally speaking means if you drink from a kol shel bracha, you can no longer use it again as a kol shel bracha. The solution, though, is just to add more wine to it, and then you could use it again. That was Daf Kufay, Masechta Pesachim. Hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.